Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia. I'm a holistic intuitive practitioner, and today I welcome Elizabeth Huang with me here for a nice conversation. Elizabeth, really, thanks so much for joining me here. I'm really excited about our conversation. And yeah, Elizabeth is a life coach and death doula. So she's a certified life coach, grief educator, and death doula who helps individuals navigate life's transitions with greater emotional awareness, adaptability, and meaning. Born and raised in California, she became deeply aware of American culture's tendency to avoid conversations about death, grief, and difficult emotions. I think it's a Western problem. It's not only an American situation. So yeah,
For
this
sure.
cultural avoidance inspired her to take a different approach, one that embraces both life and loss as interconnected experiences rather than opposing forces. And yeah, Elizabeth, again, thanks so much for joining me here today, because also in my work as a holistic intuitive practitioner, I think it's so important to talk about grief. Yeah, bless you. Not as
Thank you.
because avoiding it and pushing it away will not help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe let's start with a little bit with your personal journey. How did you become a life coach and a death doula?
Yeah. So a little bit of an overview. When I went to college way back in the day, I actually went to school as a sociology major, wanting to become a social worker. And I sort of took a roundabout way. And didn't go directly into that work. Ended up in tech for a while because I'm originally from the Silicon Valley, where there's a lot of tech companies, obviously. And then moved into real estate appraisal. And I ended up working over 120 hours a week every week for a few years. And that like completely burned me out to the point where my mental health was just not okay. And I ended up working with a life coach myself. And my relationship and experience with her was far better than any relationship or experience I had had with any other healing professional work that I had done in the past. And that sort of like reignited my interest and passion in that area. So I decided to go back into that work and did some training in the coaching realm. And during that process, I was sort of thinking about, whether or not I wanted to have a niche and what that could be. And I sort of went into this route, because I'm from the Silicon Valley, of noticing that technology use was becoming an issue. I'm not going to, I can't tell you if you have a addiction per se, right? But collectively, we are becoming more and more reliant on technology, and some people are becoming more addicted. And
Hmm.
technology and screen usage are emotional suppressants. So
Mm.
we're becoming more and more alexithymic, which is basically sort of like emotional color blindness. And the
Yeah.
problem with that is if you can't recognize your own internal emotional compass, you can't it's harder for you to recognize that with other people, and that affects nonverbal communication at home, in schools, and in the workplace. So
Yeah.
literally every aspect of your life. So
Yeah.
that's part of it. And then I also somehow was just, something must have happened, I don't even remember what, but I was thinking about how avoidant we are as a society, like Western culture is about death. This probably had something to do with COVID, and just seeing how scared and avoidant people are when it comes to death, dying, and anything that has to do with any of that stuff.
Mm.
And the problem that I have with that that are like default responses to death and dying is, if we're too scared or avoidant of the topic, then we never talk about it with our loved ones, which then means that we have less options when the time comes,
Yeah.
right? We can have discussions about what happens when you die, whether that's religiously or culturally. Um, but the fact is that everyone dies. And so everyone has to have um, has to sort of navigate those issues when the time comes. And while you can't prepare for every single outcome, you
Yeah.
can do things like have advanced directives or talk to your loved ones about what you want, or even your feelings around the matter, or how you feel about each other, and that
Yeah.
also increases intimacy. So
Yeah. And
I think the two,
share the human experience of dying, right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think like the two sort of go hand in hand together, right? If you are uncomfortable with your own emotions, or you don't know what you're feeling, how can you have these conversations? It's hard.
Yeah. And also not allowing that vulnerability of not knowing, right? I mean, who says that we
Right.
always need to know? I mean, it's
Hmm.
messy. It will be messy,
Right.
like birth and other tectonic shifts in your life. It will be messy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, amazing that you dove into this. But I also know that I mean, you're not only dealing with death. You're also, from what I read in your bio and when we were talking in advance, that you also, yeah, help people to transition other losses in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important for a few reasons to think about grief outside of, the death and dying space. One is that, if you only think about grief when like a life ends, then you're not as acclimated, for lack of a better word. You don't have the experience of like grieving. And the more you grieve like the um smaller griefs and losses in your life, the more tools that you have, and the more experience you have in feeling certain emotions when someone dies. Um, and I also think that it's important because, sometimes people talk about like the 5 stages of grief, and one of them is like acceptance, right? But I also think that grieving is a step towards acceptance. So it's almost
Mm,
like a loop, right? Like in order to accept something, you have to grieve it. And in order to grieve something, you have to accept it.
yeah.
So it's not a linear model, it's more circular. So with, a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a dream, in order to, integrate that loss, you need to grieve the hopes or the dreams or the things that, aren't going to happen the way that you wanted them
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that you're staying so grounded in the topic, because part of me wants to be like, well, then I can move on, and pursue another life
Mm.
goal or find another love or whatever. I love that you stay grounded in the experience and from what I understand, help people to experience the entire bandwidth of what it means to grieve, right? I mean, there can also be yeah, it's not my own experience, but from other people having lost a loved one to cancer, for example. There was also, they were so ashamed for feeling relieved, that that person passed away.
Yeah, and that's something that I talk about a lot is the way that I think about grief is more as like a journey of emotions. So, acknowledging that, yeah, there's like sadness and depression with grief, but there's also anger and sometimes relief, like you said, or even joy. And if we don't acknowledge these things when they do come up, people feel ashamed or guilty. But they're actually very normal responses, right? Like if you are someone who's been taking care of your husband or a family member or even a friend, a lot of people have really great friends for years because they have, let's say, dementia or cancer. And then they finally pass, there can be a lot of relief because A, they're no longer suffering, and B, you get your life back. And maybe that sounds bad to some people, but that's a completely legitimate feeling, right? Like you have your own life, and um, it it's it can be very relieving to get that back.
Mm, mm. Is there another myth you'd love to dispel in your field as a life coach and death doula or grief doula?
Um, it I think the first one that really comes to mind is that you get a coach or a doula when the time comes, meaning like when something big happens. But I really think of this work as preventative care,
Mhm.
meaning it's all the stuff that you should be working on, before you don't have the time or energy or resources to really get into it. The doula stuff, depending on where you are at your stage, like you have to wait until, let's say, you're in hospice, but there are some things that would be beneficial for people to start working on, right? Like checking in on your will or your advanced directives, and these are things that you probably should check in with every year or at least 2 years, and just as like a maintenance, right? You don't have to do like continual every week sessions, but maybe once a month, once every 2 months, things like that.
Mm. Mm. And would you want to share a little bit of how your work looks like, what people come to you in general? I think it's such a, it never occurred to me that, of course, also people that are passing away would consult with you.
Yeah, it really depends. For coaching, it can generally be anything. I specifically prefer to work with like emotions. And so people who feel overwhelmed, numb, stuck, typically will reach out to me. Anything really along those lines. And then as a death doula, it like as a role, it's sort of described as a non-medical role, so it depends on the doula. And so it's funny that it didn't occur to you that someone who's passing would reach out to um a doula, and that's not, a criticism towards you. It's sort of like
Yeah.
just the fact that like people aren't aware of what death doulas are and what they do, because it's like somewhat of a newer role. But when you think of a birth doula or a midwife, they are there for the birthing process, right? They help you give birth. So that involves both like the preparing and the actual event. So doulas, depending on the professional, could help you with like legacy work or with your will, advanced directives, or even just preparing for what the environment that you want to be in as you're passing is going to look like, is going to smell like, is going to feel like. Who do you not want to be there? Who do you want to be
Mhm.
there? Things like that. And so they can also do like vigil work, right? Which is like sitting with you as you're passing, because not everyone has someone that they, want there when the time
Mm.
comes, but they also want someone there because to pass alone feels sad or terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. Thanks so much for sharing. And also, what something that just to mention it that came up to me, it's like, yeah, as a life coach, that people actually consult you because they feel numb. I think that's such a huge step to already have that awareness that I find it hard to define it myself. Like, okay, I have a certain feeling of numbness there. It's like, how can you, because you don't have a, how can I describe that? That's really, you don't have a comparison point, when you're numb. You're like, well, how else should I feel in a situation where I'm numb? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It definitely makes sense. I think there are two main situations in which like someone who feels numb would reach out to like a coach or therapist. One is someone or many people in your life are telling you like, hey, you seem sort of like on autopilot all the time. It doesn't seem like are ever feel excited about anything, but you also don't feel very sad when something sad happens, et cetera, et cetera. So if all these people are telling you like, hey, like something seems wrong, we're not really sure what, like maybe you should see someone. Sometimes people will reach out for support. And then another situation is when the numbness gets to a point where it creates an environment where you sort of hit rock bottom, meaning like if you're numb, you're not really interacting with the world and in your own life, and things are happening, but you don't know why. So it's like, well, I'm not really sure what's going on, so I should get sort of like a third party, someone who's third party for guidance or another opinion.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for sharing this. I think numbness is such an overlooked emotion. It's not or a situation. I think it's a cover emotion like anger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's a way of coping, right? A lot of the times it's feeling so overwhelmed that your body is just sort of like, well, like we've felt this way for too long, and you just sort of dissociate maybe, or avoid those feelings. And it's not even just because of like the alexithymia and our cultural sort of way of avoiding emotions, but it's also because we're more aware than ever of international events or even local events because of the news and how the algorithm feeds things to us, and so we're constantly stimulated, and the constant stimulation of factual events and just being like, well, it's not even just like I am mismanaging my own life, or I don't know, or like I'm taking on too many things, but it's also like, well, factually, like there's all these wars going on, there's climate change, there's all these things, and so that can also create a lot of this overwhelm and numbness.
Thanks so much for sharing and breaking that down. It's super helpful. Yeah, maybe one last question. Is there anything you'd like to say to someone who's feeling stuck right now?
I mean, obviously this probably sounds obvious, but I think it's really important to have a third party professional, for lack of a better word, to check in with, whether that's a therapist, a coach, a shaman, whatever. And I think it's important that they're a third party, because while it is important to have your inner circle, your social circle, and like those close friends, they have their own relationship with you. They have a different history with you. And if you sort of treat them like a therapist or coach, that creates a dual relationship. And that's just not going to work in certain circumstances, especially if you're experiencing something new. So I think it is important to have a third party person to go to, but also, people, I know this is talked about a lot, but it is important to move your body, right? And what that looks like can be very different for everyone, right? Like some people like walking, I prefer lifting. So like I have a lot of stress and anxiety and anger sometimes, right? And like lifting is really helpful because it engages so many muscles and it feels like I'm physically doing something about that emotion. Those are very like high energy emotions, right? But if you're like more of a runner, it really just depends. I have had people, clients who are like, oh, like I have X, Y, and Z injuries, or like issues, limited mobility, things like that. So of course you should check with doctors and people like that before you try something new. But also, it doesn't even have to be something strenuous. I've talked to people who are depressed to a point where they are usually in bed for a long time, or let's say you're on hospice and just have very limited mobility because you're that sick. Even doing something like laying in bed and just like squeezing your hands together offsets some of the energy.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of playing around and seeing what works for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense, just to stay grounded in your body and make use of it and get the machine going. I mean, there are so many benefits for that, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Elizabeth,
the
thank
energy
you
has to
so
go
much. Is
somewhere.
there anything? Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share or you want to add on to our little conversation here?
I think the only thing that comes to mind is that, a lot of people will say, like, oh, you need to process your emotions, but it's like, how, right? Like, what does processing your emotions mean? And some people will say, well, you just got to feel them or you got to sit with them. But like, what does that mean? Um, so I think that it's important for people to understand that emotions are information and motivation. And so if you're feeling angry or anxious, or whatever it is, it's your body trying to tell you something, right? And so, like, yeah, you can sit with it, but the point isn't to sit with it until it's gone. It's to sit with it and like understand where it's coming from. Is it from like a past trauma, a past lesson, whatever? And or are you meant to do something with it, right? So um let's say you are in an argument with someone and you're feeling really angry. You don't just like feel it until the argument is over. It's sort of giving you the energy to do something about that situation or that relationship. And and it's important to talk about these things, especially in grief, right? Because like, let's say you lose someone to death, whether that's a person or a pet or whatever. A lot of the times, the reason why grief is so hard is because you can't do anything with those emotions because that person or that situation or that pet is gone,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of that, should be worked out in, again, coaching or therapy. But I think it's really important for people to know that processing your emotions doesn't just mean sitting with it and feeling it until it's gone. There's
Yeah.
something that should happen, right? Like it's a motivation for something.
Yeah. That's so helpful to yeah, it's so interesting how you break it down because yeah, it's like yeah, sitting with it won't help anything, right? I mean,
Mhm.
probably if you sit too long with it, you can integrate it even more and can it spiral yourself even more down. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, it's a both a balance and a skill set. And that's what, it can be very helpful when it comes to therapy and coaching and all that to learn how to use your emotions and integrate them depending on the situation.
Yeah, and as we are so yeah, I think it is a fast-paced environment right now, and as you already mentioned, we're so inundated with information from outside and social media, and lost so many skills on how to even process emotions. So it's one big part, I think, for if you have a coach or a therapist, is also to validate and
Mhm.
validate in the sense of educate yourself that you can trust your feelings, your emotions, and
Mhm.
then start to learn how to process them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I really enjoyed our conversation. And yeah, I'll share all the details where people can find you somewhere below in the description or in the accompanying text. And yeah, again, thanks so much for taking the time, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate it.
Thank you.